Welcome to demo time. How's everybody doing? I hear some clapping. More we can clap, it's okay. Excellent, thank you. So, my name is Joshua Stacy. This is demo time. Demo time is wonderful. Demo time is a time where pretty much anybody, if they reach out to me, they're working on something, they want to present it, they can present it. We try to be super supportive because we know it's hard to present things. So, one of the ways that we're going to keep time here, and it's less of an issue because there's only 2 presenters and one of them's me. When the time is up, I'll start clapping. And if I start clapping, what do you think I want you guys to do? Yes, clap. And then, so basically, we're going to go 20 minutes with this lovely Internet of Things project. What's that?
My name is Mike.
Oh,
the
Mike.
company's platforms.
Yes, Mike with Platform IoT.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then, so if we have any questions about that, after that, if there's anybody who wants to present anything, we're going to have some free time. Otherwise, it'll just be some networking. So without further ado, Mike, let's hear from you.
Sure. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the demo time. This is my second time actually presenting. Last year we had an idea. Now this time I'm actually presenting a ready-to-go business. It's
Mike, I'll give you the time. You really want to have it like right up. Like
oh, I need to. I'm sorry. I don't usually do.
Yeah. I got almost eat it.
Yeah, that's fine. So basically, this is about probably exactly 1 year ago, we did a first presentation here for our idea at that time, which was this internet platform, IoT platform that we wanted to create. So just to give you a little bit of a background, I'm a software engineer. I also have a degree in electrical engineering from Cal Poly Pomona. So I've been working software side and also hardware side for 20 plus years. So I have a lot of experience in the industry and in the market. One of the things that we do is we have an engineering company called the 10 Mile Zone where we build really cool gadgets, products, software, and etc. And working in that industry, we noticed that there is a pattern for all our customers who are making gadgets or having gadgets and they want to collect the data. Also commonly known as the Internet of Things, right? So we came up with this idea to isolate it and make a separate company service or platform. Eventually we end up doing is a platform as a service because it most accurately describes what it does. For collecting the data and automating that collection process and processing the data, post-processing the data, and creating this platform where devices publish the data on the internet, we get that data, we process it, post-process it, and we created an API where we actually give the businesses their data back to them in the form that they can use for their business. So basically the Platforms IoT is a platform where you have whatever device you have that publishes data, issues the data. So people who are in industry, either industrial IoT or, for example, medical devices or transportation devices, tags, labels, etc., and sensors. A very big market of this for us is the sensors market. These are the companies who make these products, but they don't have the IoT infrastructure to connect these devices, process the data, because the raw data that comes in from these devices needs to be post-processed. So we created this idea of automated data collection platform, completed end-to-end solution, nothing is left behind. Basically what we do is we take the data as you turn on your device and we give it back to you in a form of an API where you can actually build the app on top of it, you can build the web app, or you can just use it in your internal systems to use the data. So that's the idea behind the IoT, Platforms IoT. And then, right on time, obviously the AI came in. And it turns out that actually all of the data that we collect, faceless and frictionless, it's really good for large language models to process. So as you know, in a rapidly evolving landscape of artificial intelligence, the need for extensive high-quality data is paramount. Data often referred to now is a new oil. It's basically, if you guys are familiar with any large language models, the ones that are very successful are the ones that operate on a huge amount of data. The ones that need work, quote unquote, are the ones that are operating on a less data. So more data you have, it's just like a birthday, right? Statistically, more birthdays you have, longer you live. So it's the same thing with the AI models. More data you have, the better your algorithms work. So this need for constant collection of the data is there. Now, everybody is familiar with the large language models, for example, ChatGPT or Gemini and etc., or DeepSeek, because they will operate on the language models. However, the industrial data, medical data, has not been standardized and has not been collected enough to make those algorithms to work as efficiently as they do with the language models, right? English or natural language models. So collecting the data becomes a big business. And if you know anything about growing businesses, the number one growing business right now is data center construction in America. They're popping up everywhere. There's like crazy amount of data centers construction. So all those data centers have to be filled, and all this data has to come from somewhere. And the best place the data can come from is usually if it comes in autonomously and frictionless and faceless. Why friction? Why faceless? Let me give you a couple of sentences on what is the frictionless and what's the faceless data collection. Frictionless data is when you don't do anything for the data to be collected. For example, you don't have to enter in a ledger, you don't have to type in, you don't have to hit anything. It just automatically collects itself and packages and send it to wherever. Now, what can be a sample of the frictionless data collection? I have what I think is a perfect example here. And
To be clear, I have no idea what's in the bag.
It's a cool thing. So this is a shipping label. Everybody is familiar with the shipping label. You probably have printed maybe tens of hundreds of them. But this is not an ordinary shipping label. This is an IoT shipping label. There is an NB-IoT chip in it. There is a Wi-Fi sniffer, accelerometer, and also 9-axis sensor. Now, what all this stuff is in here, and I'll give you an explanation in exactly 1 second. So basically, in traditional shipping label, you put the address where it's shipped and where it's going, right? So on this particular label, you don't have to do anything, literally, and you can actually automatically track it based on the publishing frequency of this label. It is very self-aware. Even if it's in a basement, we're able to do the geolocation on it. We can actually tell you where your box is located in your basement, which corner of the basement it's located. When it gets shipped, you don't have to look into the ledgers, UPS site, and etc. You can actually get the real-time, near real-time, with probably about 5 milliseconds or 3 seconds delays, depending on where you are or where this thing is, on where it is, what is the conditions of the shipping, and also you can actually run the AI algorithm on it to tell when possibly it will arrive at your destination. Now, the dead cost for this label is about $35, so end customer cost is about $50 for the label. So nobody really pays $50 for the shipping label. Yes, it's expensive, but there are markets and there are companies who actually need this product. For example, a company that ships the robots across the country, they do want to have control over whatever. But the idea here is that this shipping label, you don't have to do anything. It just frictionless collects the data and sends out. You always know where your product is, what condition it is, and what was the past condition, basically, before that. Now, what is faceless? When this thing publishes data, it does not tell anyone anything about who is the owner of this product. So it only publishes the data. Doesn't tell you who you are, who you're shipping with, or doesn't tell where it's going or who is the recipient of the product. So it's completely faceless. Now, there's enough hooks there. There's MAC addresses and UUIDs that we generate. We can actually face the data if necessary for the business processes, but data itself is completely faceless. So we don't know where it comes from, who is the owner, nothing, absolutely nothing that identifies. Why is it important? Because that is very important if you're dealing with the data from the medical devices. For example, blood pressure machines, or glucose meters, or pulse meters, and etc. Some other stuff that requires the data to be HIPAA compliant, and you can actually collect the data as a data without having to go through the extensive HIPAA compliance procedures. And then on the ERP or other software, they actually can face the data and use the data for the patient treatment and also for medical research. So that's 2 words about basically about what the frictionless and faceless data collection is. Now, why is this important, or what is the reason for this platform? process that I described to you sounds like very simple, right? You take the device and then you give it to me in the form of API. But itself, it's a very, very, very hard technical process, because you need, number one, 5 different disciplines of engineer. First discipline of engineers you need is the firmware engineers. And then what you need is, firmware engineers basically are the engineers who write the firmware for these gadgets. And then, we do electrical engineering, but not for this particular thing. So you can skip the electrical engineers. But then you also need the cloud engineers who can actually create the infrastructure where these gadgets publish the data, then you collect the data, then you do some processing, and then you push it in, most likely into the timestamp database or some kind of cache or somewhere where you can do near real-time processing. Then you need another discipline of engineers that you need is what is called the middle tier application engineer. So this is typical Java, C#, other type of engineers who write object-oriented language programs that actually can post-process the data and do processing with that data. Requires different kind of engineering skills. And then fourth discipline of engineers that you need is data engineers. This data goes into vector databases, into timestamp databases, which is not good for the business processes. It's really good for processing the incoming data, fast-coming data, or what we call that timestamp data. But it is not good for the business process. So that needs to be post-processed, and then the databases have to be maintained. And then the fifth discipline of engineers you need is engineers who actually can create something on top of that API that you created. So it could be React application, React.js application, or something else, but it's another completely different discipline of engineers. Now, even the companies who have the resources, they don't want to go there because it's a very small part of it, and usually they're not in the business of, like we are, building the IoT platforms. So that's why the service is needed, and that's why people or the companies are looking for this kind of service, and we created this service to make that process easier. So in the technical terms, what you're looking at here, as you can see here, this is the Think device. It comes in, goes into the cloud, we do the post-processing, and then you get an API. Could be streaming, could be WebSocket, or could be any kind of REST API that you need. We basically learn about your business model, we build your microservice, and about 5% of the project has to be built. The other 95% is already factored into the platform services. So we build API that fits your business model, and then on the other hand, we get the data from the devices, and then we give it back to you in exactly the format that you want. So that's why we call it end-to-end and from A to Z solution. Now, some of the examples that I want to show you, and I don't know how I'm doing with the time or whatever. So this is a typical shipment, went from point A to point B. At any time, it was actually giving the temperature information, humidity, last update, impact level. That's why we have the accelerometer. Somebody drops your box, we can actually tell if it's been dropped or not. And orientation, which means somebody rolls over or flips over, that actually the 9-axis sensor will track it, and then some battery indicator. So this is one example. Another example of array of sensors giving an enormous amount of data. It's unfortunately, because of the screen, you can't see here. But this is agricultural monitoring, so you can measure how much water has been used. This is for greenhouse, but it could be used also large-scale agriculture. Temperature around, humidity, air pressure, ambient light, some leaf wetness, you name it. And this is near real-time monitoring. And again, you don't have to identify either the source or the final destination. The data can actually be identified later in the process. Now, this one here is for a company that makes sensors. And one of the interesting things that what they do is they make sensors that mostly used on the oxygen tanks at the hospitals. So old ways is they know exactly, they had a schedule every so often somebody goes there, pick up the old tanks, brings the new tanks back. Now, because those are IoT sensors, now they can actually monitor the level of the oxygen in the hospitals, and they can actually optimize their routes, their driver routes. So instead of sending 3 tanks, they can send 1 now, and instead of sending or waiting until they know exactly how much they have, so they can we also can run predictive analysis for the machine learning algorithms for them, and it will tell you approximately when is the best time to send the driver, so it's actually better for them, so they optimize their business. And just to give you what kind of impact it might actually have, they have doubled the number of the sales since they started going into this IoT route. They literally sell twice as much sensors now they did last year around this time. So that's a
All right. So one of the nice things about this here is we just saw a presentation. I'm not going to lie. I saw some interesting things. I grew some peas in the desert, and they were delicious. My wife and I had them last night. I think with real-time information like this, they would have been a lot better. So we're at the Q&A portion of this. Raise your hand if you have a question. I have a mic. You'll be able to ask it.
Yeah, the automobile industry is moving right to this, where they're collecting data from how fast the car accelerates, how hard the braking is, how hard they turn, and collecting the data so they can sell it back to the insurance companies, as well as keep track of the car components and their problems and failure rates and things like that. So any comments on that?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. Auto industry has been doing this for a very long time. Again, the auto industry is probably most technologically, beyond the aircraft manufacturing, the auto industry is the most advanced manufacturing. So when you get to that advanced level of manufacturing, yes, this becomes part of your process. What we do is we bring that process, that incredibly advanced engineering teams at the Toyota or at the other places they already have. They're using it. We're not going to Toyota. We're not trying to sell it to them because they have this. As a Motorola vice president told me once, they can probably build one in 3 days. But you have to have the resources. You have to be in the market. Now they're there. They're using it, and you're right. Now the insurance companies are trying to either buy it from them, or if you notice, if you renewed your insurance lately, they will say, if you want to use our app or you want to use our device, we give you a 20% discount. But guess what? It's a good thing. If you're a good driver, they will analyze the data. They will honestly, if they do honest analysis, that's actually a good thing, because it will separate the good driver from the bad driver. But that's exactly what they want to do. But there's a problem with that. Is that insurance companies, what they do is they do not collect the faceless data. So that device is assigned to you, you own it, it's in your policy, it stays on your record. And if your son has been driving that car, right, then you got a problem, because he probably was actually speeding. So there's benefits and disadvantages of using any kind of technology, but just because it could not be used somewhere, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be used. But you were 100% right. Auto industry has been doing this for a long time. Our goal is that we bring that kind of technological advancement into small businesses. Like one of our clients right now that we're working, making pain management, back pain management device, which has a couple electrodes. You put it in. There's a certain ways they manage the pain, and they want to have a real-time information about their patients, how their movements improve, for example, after the sessions. So we actually build it, onboard it. One of the processes that we do, we onboard the device on our platform, and they concentrate on what they do the best, is, doing the research on pain management. Yeah.
All right. We got anybody else with a question? I got a mic here. I hand it to you. It goes on. Oh, got some. Hold on. The viewers at home won't be able to hear.
Or like a company deploying something like that, just say 100 units, what would they be looking to spend per year?
Yeah, we actually, we're a very interesting position. We work with startups and we work with very large companies. So we don't have anybody in between, but you said 100 units is actually pretty much where our bread and butter is. It's a small either startup or a new company, or they're trying to test the market. That's where we perform the best. So basically, the total onboarding cost is less than $5,000. So you get access to the API for less than $5,000. You cannot unjustify that kind of cost, because even just looking at it, if you calculate your own hours that you're going to learn how to do this stuff, it's probably going to be at least 10 times more. Yeah, so it's roughly around 5,000. We make our money. Our income comes from our service, software as a service. So more devices you sell, so we're kind of vested into your success. We try to build it as much as successful as possible, so you can be as successful as possible, because we have service agreements. Usually it's between 50 cents to $3 per unit per device. And more you sell, more money we make. And that's where we make our profits, not on the onboarding. So onboarding is pretty cheap. It's about $5,000 maximum.
That's a good example of knowing what you're trying to accomplish. Sometimes people try to make too much money at every level of a transaction,
Yeah.
so they never end up getting a rolling customer base.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have actually built a platform type of service for a very large company for $140,000, but it was a total loss for us because $140,000 that we got to pay that platform, the first order they activated was 250,000 units. I got zero out of it. So they paid us heftily to build a system for them, but we get no continuous revenue generation. In our business model, what we call the revenue generating units, engineering is one of the revenue generating units, but our main revenue generating unit is a software as a service or a platform as a service, whichever way you want to call it. So we onboard you very easy, we give you everything that you succeed, and we ask a small portion of it after you succeed, basically.
Excellent. Any final questions? Oh.
Hey, thank you for your. I'm working. Great presentation. I actually work in the healthcare industry, and we use this real-time location system, right?
Yeah. I just got first published about 3 months ago, called Infusomed. We use that. We are very big in the home health industry.
Yeah. So in the hospitals, right? They have the vendor they use is GE. Mm-hmm. Do you particularly see any other industries that you can use this service, or is it more valuable as data, because then you can track trends of where a product or this whatever you're tracking will be in the future?
Yeah, that's excellent question.
So it's not the actual product; it's where these things will be.
I'm actually, what I'm trying to do right now, I'm trying to tell you about something, but I have a non-disclosure agreement, and it's a very, 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 very famous medical study, and I cannot even tell what it is, but let me put it this way. We accidentally participated in a research that was actually, well, not accidentally participated, we were chosen to participate, but it turned out a medical drug. Everybody's talking about it, on basically studies about them. And it's widely popular. And it's prescription drug. So basically what we did is we collected the data, and different institutions use the same data to conduct their research, because the data is faceless, and it was coming in from the focus group, and that was actually used to evaluate certain conditions, okay? So that's one use of it. However, the same data was used, because this comes from the actual patients. So the providers use the same data for the treatment of the patients. And this is dual use. That's how we figure out that data can actually be automatically used for the research as well. However, where we concentrate, because entry barrier for the medical industry into the hospital market is these companies who supply those things at 100 times of what you would be buying on the open market. They build such a barrier that it's impossible for, and we're not in some kind of social justice, or healthcare justice business, so we can't penetrate that per se, because it's an oligopoly. But what we do is we have right now blood pressure machines, oxygen meters, glucose machines, scales, and other devices that you can actually use for the home healthcare. So if you're a home healthcare provider, nurse practitioner, and etc., and you want your data to automatically flow without you going in, logging in, writing down, putting down, writing, typing in, whatever, that system we already have, and it actually works. And we actually have an app that's in an app store, got finally approved by the Apple, and it is there. It's called the Infusomed. If anybody is interested, they can actually download and see the sample.
Thank you, my friend. I'll take the mic.
Oh, can't go home with this, right?
All right, everybody. So today we get an exciting opportunity. I'm going to talk about something I did like 6 years ago, but I think you're going to find it really interesting. And if not, that's fine. Some of you might not like everything about it, but that's a part of the excitement of innovation. Not all innovation is accepted by everybody right away. So if you bear with me for just a moment, I'm going to set up my laptop and I'll do the presentation. And just as a heads up, when I get done, we've got some time for some extra presentations. So if anybody wants to do a 2 or 3 minute presentation on something you're working on or anything you want to talk about, feel free to, we can do that. So I will be ready in a moment. So I have a tattoo on my left arm. It's pretty big. And I don't have a lot of tattoos. I grew up Mormon, wasn't really into tattoos. Was Mormon till almost 30, actually. And most of the tattoos I have, a handful of them, are of businesses that I've done or products I've launched. StreamRift is one of the ones that I'm the most proud of. It's also one I've talked about the least. Ironically, it's also probably had the largest impact. I'll get into it. Guys, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pick a time for this. How about tomorrow at 6? That sounds great. How about just not now? Would not now be okay? Windows, I'm so sorry. I know Windows, not everything's about you. Yet. Okay.
Don't tell them that to my daughter.
Yeah, we're back in business. All right, so have you ever done something that you should regret, perhaps, but you don't? I'll fucking do it again. Maybe we've seen this meme. So I got some t-shirts I want to get made up. It says this: I'm the descendant of men who would not be ruled. For those who don't know my ancestry, it goes back to Prussia. For those that don't know Prussia, that's fine. It's Germany now. There was a guy named Otto von Bismarck, and the Blood and Iron Wars united Germany. That's the blood in my veins. A lot of pomp and circumstance. Okay, but we'll get into some other things here. So innovation comes with risk. About 7 years ago, I went to the Mirage. I didn't live in Vegas at the time. And I put up a booth. And I said, hey, everybody, I believe in this great, brave new world where we're going to be able to have uncensored internet. It's going to be awesome. And at the time, YouTube was starting to censor firearms channels, which, on the balance of things, isn't necessarily that big of a deal. But I'm not really a big censorship guy. And I was really excited because I went to this conference. I spent $8,000. And I got 70 advertisers. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. It's working. Has anybody ever had a moment where they're working on a project and it seemed like everything was working? And then it didn't? Don't worry, that's a part of this story. All right, so on March 23rd, 2019, I got an unusual email. The subject was terrorist abuse. I was instantly confused. I'm not generally a fan of abuse, but if they're terrorists, well, it complicates things. Terrorists aren't great, but should we abuse terrorists? Anyway, that was just the subject. Strange opening. All right. Here's the full email, and you're not going to be able to read it, but it's from the UK Metropolitan Police Counterintelligence Terrorism Referral Unit, and there was a video on my website. And I'm not saying it was a good video. There's about 30,000 videos on there. This video happened to be the distinction of being probably the most radioactive video on the internet. And every major platform was censoring it. Reddit, if you even talked about it, you'd get your account banned. Subreddits would get banned if they even allowed discussion on it. And so here's the email. They go, Dear Catbox. Now, Catbox is a slang term for a gossip mag. And I thought that was a rough start. Dear Catbox. Now, there's also catbox.moe that also hosts content. So I'm assuming they just copy pasted it. But that's what the Google got me. And they said, hey, under UK law, neat, we think you should take this down. So I asked some questions. I said, I have great news. I got this to legal. And they'd ask some questions I couldn't answer. What part of this video is considered to be a part of any of violating your laws? Does the question make sense? I'm not sure I understood them. Could you help me? They told me I was helping terrorists. They cited the UK Terrorism Act of 2006, Sections 1 and 2. And it feels like they didn't realize that Americans had rejected British rule a long time ago. So I didn't recognize the authority of those laws. I talked to my attorney. He said, as long as I don't do anything that's illegal here, I can never be extradited. I said, that's awesome. God, that's cool. Oh, and they said, we fear a ripple effect on people in the UK who harbor similar abhorrent views and are keen to limit its spread. I hope that's helpful. I said, I think you're helping terrorists. And they said, appreciate the laughter. This was a bit high stakes for me, if I'm being honest. The impacts of doing this were fairly significant, but totally worth it. One of the things that they said was that it's disseminating material that's harmful. I did some research on this before I agreed to host this video, and what I had realized was when the media presents content as being like glamorous, like, oh, there's the Scranton Strangler, he struck again. That encourages copycat behavior because people want to be on the news. That's well studied, that's supported. And what is also supported is if you present stuff correctly and you say, here's a bad thing that happened and this is a bad thing, it doesn't create more of that same behavior. So I tried to explain that to them and they were unimpressed. Then I said, no. I said, other than the insight above, which I suspect you'll dismiss out of hand, I don't believe at this point I can be of much more assistance. Nothing you've said leads me to believe there's any merit to removing this content. And to be clear, I believe that if we remove this content, we're actually helping support terrorism by essentially making it more taboo, more naughty, more salacious than it was because of the way it was treated. So I believe that an uncensored internet is the best internet. It's not a perfect solution. I know there's a lot of strong opinions about censorship. Some of them are pretty compelling. But on the balance, I think that one of the biggest takeaways I took away from this, which, since this is demo time, one college dropout from upstate New York that knew a thing or two about computers was able to host a piece of content that the entire censorship complex wanted off the internet, and they couldn't do anything about that, apparently. So, that's why I have this tattoo. Independent internet is indeed best internet. And that's that. All right, if you don't want to applaud, that's fine. Not everybody likes this. But I'm also internationally a terrorist, apparently, even though here I'm just a law-abiding citizen that pays his taxes. Some side notes about this journey I went on. The New Zealand, far and away, was the worst country of all with censorship. Them and Australia were fairly linked. They both made it literally a criminal offense if you worked for a company that hosted content and it didn't come down fast enough. New Zealand actually has their own censorship department. Individuals watching, quote, objectionable content end up facing up to 14 years in prison. Up to 10 years for viewing it and up to 14 for sharing a link. There's a young man who was 22 who faced 28 years in prison for sharing a link to 2 of his friends. So my grandfather served as a cook in the Navy in World War II. My bloodline has survived combat. My bloodline survived war. I love this country. I love living in Las Vegas because it's a town that values rebellion and freedom more than anywhere else in the world. So if I can't travel the world because apparently they don't like me, I've never even been there. I'm just a guy doing his thing here. And they're like, oh, you're on list now. And I'm like, cool. So anyway, and then one of the other things that was interesting, in 2019, people didn't believe the internet was censored. And it was sort of interesting because my wife actually, it clicked for her in a moment, a post on Nextdoor got deleted. She's like, what the hell? And you know, obviously during some of the more recent events, the types of censorship that's happening became a lot more obvious. But at that time, nobody really believed that censorship was a problem. So the ultimate, you know, StreamRift.com is still alive and well. It's still getting traffic. It's still serving videos. It never achieved economic success, or at least hasn't yet, because no one really believed it was a problem. And every single one of those advertisers that I had lined up, once I took that line in the sand and said I believe in free speech, I think that one of the 30,000 plus videos on the site could be that video. Every one of them said no dice. And that's when I realized things were pretty serious about the economics of the internet. And so when I say independent internet is the best internet, I'm meaning that individuals that are directly supporting platforms and not being the product are really the balance, like the shifts the balance of power. And so, you know, I guess I'd close on this. If you're thinking about what the internet will be like in the future, think about the experience you get at Amazon. You pay a couple of bucks a month to buy things, and there's a lot of features baked into it. And if you go to like a free website, there's a lot of ads on it, there's a lot of manipulation going on it, it's more problematic. And so a lot of these advertiser and VC funded startups and technologies have really taken control of the narrative online because of an old rule. Some of you, let me know if you've heard this one before. Raise your hand if your parents ever said, as long as you live under my roof, you'll live under my rules. Yeah, no, it makes a measure of sense. The logical corollary to that is if it's your house, it's your own rules. So if you're an internet user and you're supporting a site with a direct payment, like a lot of like the Patreon and different types of things that actually help provide direct support for content creators, help solve that type of a problem. And I'm not necessarily a fan of Patreon, but I'm a huge fanboy of the internet. God, I love the internet. And so with that, does anybody have any questions for the neighborhood delinquent?
Well, I was born in a communist country,
So basically, if you go to like the UK or New Zealand, Australia, you're going to get arrested pretty much? You would get arrested?
Yeah, so I don't know
Okay.
which is a bad answer.
Right.
So I believe I'm on a list, and it's not a good list.
Yeah.
And I believe it's a list where I go through security at the airport, and they direct me a certain way, and then my family never hears from me again. Because there's so much that unraveled from this. So is anybody familiar with Five Eyes?
Yeah.
All right, so for those that don't know, this country used to be really afraid of Russia. Some people are still afraid of Russia. Okay, fine. So to combat that, there's this Five Eyes, intelligence sharing between the UK, the US, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK. And there's some bullshit they play. Part of the bullshit they play is it's illegal for our government to spy on us. And it really doesn't like that. That's very upsetting to it. It really wants to spy on us. But it's not illegal, for example, for the UK to spy on us. And then if the UK has an intelligence sharing agreement with the US, they get to not technically spy on us, but they send the stuff over. All this to say, when I went down this rabbit hole, I learned an awful lot. And I learned even more to appreciate the freedom I have. I can say and do things here. Based off of the number of users in New Zealand that saw this video, I'd face north of 250,000 years in prison. I've never even been there. Why do they care?
Thanks. That was it.
I want to roll for it.
Yeah. Some things are about you.
Yeah, I was actually born in a communist country, so when you said it's no joke. I mean, UK is not a communist country, but try that in Russia or whatever, you're definitely going to be behind the bar. Now, one of the things that I want to tell you, because I used to work for the company that does surveys, and then we used to buy the samples, and I can tell you right now, the government doesn't spy on you because they don't need to do it. Facebook does, Google does. So if they need anything from you, about you, they will buy it from Facebook or from the YouTube.
Right. So DHS has a department called CISA that can go itself. That was for YouTube, by the way. I'd happily say that word. I'm more than happy to. I actually said it a few times. But yeah, no, there's an entire entrenchment of tracking all that stuff.
Yeah.
No, I accepted the fact. Well, yeah, there is more to the story, but
when I was
so much time, and
when
not
I was
everything's
doing,
about me.
Yeah, when I was trying to do a survey, let's say for I needed 1,000 young white woman divorced.
I only need one.
No, I'm just saying I need to buy the.
Two's nice. I'm sorry.
I need to buy the sample information for these particular people. So I would say, for example, I'll say Facebook. I need to have 1,000 white women divorced with secondary education, Christian faith, who actually also have oncological problems. And believe me, they will give you that information with
I
precision.
believe it.
Yeah, and so the government doesn't spy on you. It's Facebook that does.
Oh no.
So first of all, I agree with you, and I think this is a really good topic because I think people don't talk about it as much as they should, because I feel like with each passing day, and not to turn this into a political discussion, but it seems like both sides are doing more and more censorship of their and they've each got their kind of own flavors of censorship. And so to me, it seems like it's getting worse and worse. I've been on Reddit for a few years, and just recently I've starting to be banned from subreddits because of things that that are completely benign, innocuous statements that nobody should be banned for.
You were only slightly slight of left.
Well,
I
I'm not
kid,
Joseph
but-
Stalin. Well, so,
Right.
yeah, not left of Joseph Stalin. But so my point is, or I guess my question to you is, do you see this just getting worse in the future, or are there any platforms now that people can? Because I'm starting to look for alternative platforms to Reddit, YouTube, and these kind of corporate controlled social media apps and websites where they're increasingly becoming more and more censorshiped. And I think even if you disagree with somebody on an issue, you should be able to at least discuss your differences rather than because you think a certain way, you should be banned or you should be silenced.
So I'll
I
answer
think
this.
that's very dangerous.
I'll answer a few things a few different ways. Just as a general note, I went like 3 years hard in the paint on all the platforms that I could comfortably navigate and figured out what sort of the four corners were of what they would and wouldn't censor. It's different per network. In terms of, so one of the interesting developments about Musk buying Twitter is that a bunch of folks that do not like the new regime went to a platform called Blue Sky, and there's a lot to untangle on a lot of this. One of the challenges with censorship is that you basically drive groups to unmoderated sections where it becomes an echo chamber and they reinforce it, and they're not testing their ideas against others. And so I have a 4chan's currently down, which has really increased my productivity more than I'd like to admit. Where am I going to get my terrible? I've got like 40,000 saved memes. I've got like a whole folder that can keep me out of any country anyway. I think a part of what needs to happen is people need to actually see this as a problem and understand that there's alternatives. So one of the most pernicious things I think about technology the way it is right now is most of us are using cloud solutions. If I had done this on Amazon Web Services, it would have been over in about a half a second. Instead, for 7 months, a completely unmoderated discussion board was able to view via browser, ranking page 1, position 1 on Google, a video, and have a public discussion about this. Now, something that's loosely related, September 11th, 2001, I was a high school senior in New York. And I was in upstate, ways away from the city, more cows and corn, where I'm from. But the idea that something like that could happen in New Zealand, and there's information available, but the people in that town couldn't have access to understand what happened in their backyard, that seemed unconscionable to me. And what I'll tell you is courage is contagious. And what I've noticed is the more that I speak up and the more I bring attention to it, it's awkward at times, but it helps. Another thing that I've done, and some of you probably already know this, I talk a lot of shit on LinkedIn. And I got banned once for like a year. It was really bothering me. I have a really nice network of people who might not, again, say yes, as it were. So I don't have to rebuild that, and I got it back. But what I've been delighted about is I really try to have real discussions with people that disagree with me on things online. And the more patient I am and the more I engage with it, it de-escalates things a bit, and it's more along the lines of, can't we all be on the same platform? Because this is the other thing that makes no goddamn sense to me, right? We can go right now to Fremont Street. We're gonna see people walking up and down Fremont Street. No one gives a shit that they disagree about things. They're just drinking and having a good time like they shouldn't, how dare they? Same thing with the Strip, same thing with any boardwalk anywhere in this country, right? This country isn't fundamentally at our throats. I think hate's un-American, and the divisiveness that the censorship encourages, it's meant to amplify things that are just fundamentally un-American. We're in the desert here. The sun's trying to kill us all, right? It's dry, the sun gets, I'm from a place where it snows like 4 feet. Imagine what I do when it's 120 degrees out. I'm like a German Shepherd. I just can't get comfortable. So I'd say in the experience of sort of going through all of this, I think that the number one thing that helps combat it is just winning a little checkpoint that we are being censored. And I'm a heavy extrovert, and that happens very rarely in engineering, but I'm an extrovert engineer. For me to think, I need to talk. It's literally a part of how my brain processes information. So if you're saying there's things I can't even talk about, You're saying, I can't use my brain. I can't think. That is crazy to me. And so I responded appropriately, or consistent with that. I don't know if it's appropriately. So anyway, any follow-up?
Well, I was just going to say, I think, like I said, this is a really good topic, and I think you seem very passionate about this topic, and you seem to have experience with it. So I would say, if this is something you would talk about more, I think people would really appreciate it. I would.
I appreciate it. Raise your hand if you agree. Oh, thank you. A story for another time is the fallout from it. I got approached by an organization called Cicada 3301. That's the tattoo underneath my StreamRift tattoo. That's a crazy story, best reserved for drinking or cannabis. All right, who else has a question? We've got a microphone here. Going once. Oh.
Two things. 2001, Homeland Security wrote an article on me, called me the world's greatest cyber threat, so I know the list you're going on.
Yep.
You don't want to go to Canada to find out.
So before I lived in DC for about 10 years. Yeah. And I was actually an elders quorum teacher in the Mormon faith there for about 2 years, which means for about 2 years I was teaching about half the class was the intelligence community.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
These are people I know I'm on their lists.
So, the hosting. How'd you get around the hosting?
Oh, how'd I get around the hosting? Who else wants to hear how I got around the hosting? Pretty fucking cool, huh? Whole world's shutting it down. I'm sitting here saying, so I didn't know if it would work, but I sure as hell felt like trying. Because how often do you get to do something like this? So, side note, to give you an idea of how bad it was, so when this video came out, and because this is going on YouTube and this is a super sensitive subject, I'm leaving some details out. I'm as open as anything about it, just ask me off camera, as it were. Torrenting went down. So for those that are more technical, you already know what I'm thinking. For those that aren't technical, torrent lets you send a file from one person to another. It's how LimeWire and Napster and these old companies worked. And what would happen is basically you have the file on your computer, and then there's a code, and if someone else puts it on their computer, then it'll try to connect with you so that way you can share the file. And so this is a way to go share peer-to-peer file transfer. One of the ways I could have done it was that, but I built on bare metal, and I didn't build on any, I'm the system admin on all of the hardware that was hosting everything, so no one actually knew where it was. And if they tried to hunt it down, they'd have to go through probably 3 layers. Like when they sent me this email, boy, this one cracked me up. Oh, terrorist abuse. Hey guys. So they filled out that because they're like, oh, we're gonna contact complaint, or what is it? Yeah, complaints at StreamRift.com, great. So, hi, I'm complaints at StreamRift. Hi, I talked to my attorney, but I'm also legal. Then another thing is on the video itself, I had to report this video button because some people were really pissed about it. And that's fair, like I'm not knocking that. But then they'd like report it and they'd expect me to remove it. But I'd laugh and I'd laugh. The reason why I laughed is it's obviously a terrible video. This is not a subtle thing. I understand this. And so a part of the problem with the way a lot of engineering is happening right now is a lot of it is with providers that will tell you what you can and can't do with the tech. And part of what I've had to give up a tiny little inch with AI to use the APIs because I don't have $500,000 for graphics cards. So I'll give them 3 cents. And but it did set me up with, I guess the kids are calling it RAG these days. A lot of the stuff that all of the traditional computing does is really good for organizing LLM prompts and processes. So it's like I'm able to build these huge context engines. So when it's hitting the API, it's using a very limited amount of information. Side note, back in the ChatGPT 3.5 days, all those 2 years ago, I asked it how I could have, what would be a good plan to have a revolution in my country. And I thought that was a good question to figure out what team it was on. And it was like, well, first of all, you got to think about the foreign implications of this. There's unrest and other countries might want. It just went at it. And I was like, we're going to get along great. So maybe I can use your API and give you the 3 cents. And yeah, all right, I could Anyway, no, on some of them, yeah. So anyway, as it sits right now, AI is the frontier of censorship. I'll say one of the things that's really encouraging is the open source market on AI models means that you can't have an aligned model that's too obnoxious, or folks will go to an open source one. And so OpenAI has really pulled back their alignment, as it were, and like they let you say and do a lot more than they would have in prior models. And I think they see that, like, as unpleasant as it might be to let people use technology to go down paths we don't want them to, the alternative is gatekeeping progress and becoming the tyrant. And that's never been good for the peasants. And so right now we're at a really interesting piece in history where the peasants collectively have more power than they've ever had. In aggregate, the peasants have more than enough power to sort of break the chains of whatever's bothering them. And with AI, we're seeing the ability of coordinating that information at scales that have never been possible before. And we're also able to, like as a side note, in context, this won't be as shocking as it would have been otherwise. Last week, I filed a federal lawsuit against a sitting judge, 2 attorneys in their law firm. And I did it pro se without an attorney, and I used AI. And earlier this week, I got a motion denied by the judge. You might think, oh, that sucks. Denied doesn't sound good. No, I filed it because I wanted it granted, if I'm being honest. But I asked for something incredibly aggressive. It was an ex parte emergency motion. Basically, before even anyone responds, give me what I want. And the judge could have dismissed my complaint in its entirety. He could have done all sorts of other things, but instead, he just denied my motion. And that was one peasant with ChatGPT and 200 hours going over all the details and laying it out neat and tidy. So I saved about $150,000 of attorney, and I got a record right now that is outstanding. I might still lose, fine, whatever. But I took a shot at a sitting judge, 2 attorneys, and a law firm, and a federal judge was like, no, I want to hear more. So what does that mean about the balance of power for the peasants? To me, only good things. Unless you're not paying attention, unless you're not engaging with it, unless you're not actually noticing the change of the wind around you. Because the winds are changing. Like the legal market, one of the groups I like talking a lot of shit about online to their faces is attorneys, and especially law professors. Because there's a lot of law professors out there right now that have never actually practiced law. So they're teaching people things that are wrong, and our entire court systems are getting screwed up because we have people who are incompetent making rulings that are unsupported by law, and it just makes this huge chain effect that's just terrible. But now, anybody with $20 can go literally dump all of the filings, all of the information, and go through it, and not have to pay an attorney $300, $400, $500 an hour for 10, 50, 100 hours to figure out what's going on. So I don't know about you guys, but I think that's pretty fucking exciting. Yeah? All right. Excellent. All right, we got any final questions? No? Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out. This has been a really exciting opportunity. I didn't want to lead with this. This was something that happened, like I said, about 6 years ago. There's a lot more to me than this. But also, part of me is this. I don't have, like I said, I don't have a lot of ink. If you want to call me StreamRift, feel free. My StreamRift account on Reddit is banned. My StreamRift account on Twitter is banned. You might get a theme that perhaps I don't know how to contain myself on the internet. Quite the contrary. I'm a boundary tester. Anyway, all right. So, does anybody want to share, do 2-3 minutes about anything they're working on? If you'd like, we can do that. If not, I'll just open it up for networking. I know these days go long and people like to chat. So, raise your hand if you want to tell us a little bit about what you're working on. Going once. Oh!
Double teaming.
Double team it.
So, Tim May, guys, I run the AI, or host the AI Meetups. You probably see me there a few times. One of the things I've been working on for a few years is an open source platform. This is MIT licensed, so it's very permissive. Anybody can grab this and work with it. Essentially what we do is we take a Swagger, or what we call an open API specification, which is your REST interface, and we generate an entire back-end code to run on cloud platforms. We're also targeting colo and on-prem and T1s into your basement. Okay, so the idea is we have the idea that you can define your application, generate a lot of the code deterministically generated, and then you can run it on different locations, so you can move your workloads between different clouds or even into colo or even to an on-prem if you want to. Anyway, we just kind of did our first big release of Lazy Magic. So you can go to lazymagic.org, and all the code's available on the repos, and we're just going to keep adding more and more to our documentation set. Love feedback. So if anybody wants to take a look at it, give us feedback. We'd really appreciate it. And again, it's all open source. It's all free. That's it.
And you can run that all on the free usage tier of AWS, right?
Yeah. Well, the idea is, everybody familiar with free usage tier on AWS is? Anybody not know? Wow.
I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Actually, you can run a small business for nothing on AWS. Whoa. So if you have an idea, you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to get going quickly, get that MVP out the door, this is an ideal opportunity to do that. And by the way, AWS isn't the only cloud provider that does that. You get the same kinds of benefits on Azure, with a few differences. You get the same kind of benefits on GCP, Google's Compute Cloud. So there's lots of ways. If you're, got that idea, you just want to get it out the door, get it running, get that MVP going, you can do it at very low cost these days if you're sort of aware of the opportunity. And in our case, we use the AWS serverless application model, which makes it very easy because it scales to 0, which means that if you're not actually running it, it turns out everything off, so you're not incurring any costs. So you don't have to stand stuff up and run it for a couple $100 a month. If there are no users, there's no cost, which is kind of nice, right?
Excellent.
Normally we annotate the code to generate the Swagger. So normally we annotate the code to generate the Swagger. So it's
No,
like
it's the other way around. We take the Swagger and generate code.
where do you take the Swagger from?
Oh, a Swagger is just a specification of the operations and data to be transferred. So when you have a Swagger application, it'll say, okay, I want to create an order, and here's the and here's the order content. That's your data transfer object, right? So by defining that, you're saying, here's what I want to do, and here's the data involved. The back end, it usually resolves into create, read, update, delete, and list, CRUDL. Right? So we create all those basic operations for all the DTOs, and then you would embellish that with business logic on top, which you just add on top of what we generate.
You guys can catch up about that after this. All right. Well, everybody, it's been another demo time. I'm going to ask you a question. If this was a good use of your time, raise your hand.
It was fun.
Yay, it was fun. Was it what you were expecting? No, how could you? It's not like that. We've got sensors around the world and censorship around the world.
Faceless, frictionless.
It's faceless, it's frictionless. All right, well, I will leave the remainder of the time for you guys to do with as you please. If anybody wants to present, always feel free to reach out to me. Thanks again for coming to Demo Time.